telling us it's 9 o'clock?
Yes, 9 o'clock.
Perfect. All right. We start with this, yes?
Yes.
All right, wait, Vishamru first. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Rivin b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam, oti le'olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. V'ayom hashvi Shabbat v'yinafash, Shabbat v'yinafash, Shabbat v'yinafash. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Savri. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. L'chaim. And our blessing for Torah study, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen, amen. All right, good morning. Happy to be with you guys. Rabbi Barris has been spending this past week in Israel with APAC, and now he's going to his in-laws. So I am excited to be with you. And we have a double portion Chukat Balak, but it's too much. So we're only going to talk about Balak. Let me warn you, there's a handout in the back of the room. You know me, I don't use the book very much anymore. Anyways, when I was studying Balak this week, I had a flashback to a podcast that I listened to, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, which of course everything digital you can look up, so I revisited. So there, in this podcast, it was called The Living Room. Apparently it was made into a short movie called The Neighbor's Window. Anyways, this woman is in a New York apartment, a garden apartment, and she one day is looking out across the garden, and new tenants have moved into this building across the garden from her and have removed apparently the drapes that are on the bedroom, okay? And so she sees this young, beautiful couple that is always walking around naked and is very sexually active, and apparently their headboard is up against the window, so it's on full display, and she has just had a child and feels not so confident in her body and keeps trying not to look, but can't tear her eyes away. And anyways, she tells the story of watching this couple, and then they kind of disappear, and when they come back, she sees this woman who looks older, it takes her a while to realize it's the same woman, and she sees this skeletal man. And so she watches as this very vibrant couple goes through his cancer treatment. And So why am I telling you this story? First of all, you can read it or listen to it. It was a podcast. It's a great listen. But the idea that I felt very mixed listening to it, right? It's this gorgeous, beautiful story, very emotional. I won't give away the ending. But the whole time, she's stealing this story from somebody else's private life, right? Like, she is not a part of their world. She is just spying in, and there's something very violating about that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So in our Torah portion this week, we get one of these incredible famous lines, right? Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov. We can all sing, right? How good are your tents, O Jacob? Right, we get this story because we have this awesome story of King Balak who wants to have the local powerful sorcerer, right, Balaam or Balaam, depending on English or Hebrew pronunciation, to come and curse the Jewish people because Balak is saying, like, this little twerpy people is taking out some pretty big kingdoms. I'm intimidated. Let's curse them. I hear that they're only doing well because God's on their side, right? Let's curse them so I can take them over. Balaam at first refuses, but is convinced through money and a series of questionings, right? He starts riding his donkey. His donkey sees an angel in a road that the prophet doesn't see, which is its own kind of a thing, but that's a different section, not our triennial section, right? Eventually goes and says, I can't curse those who God does not want to curse, but I'm gonna try. Sets up sacrifices, tries to do all of this stuff to kind of win God to his side, but whenever he opens his mouth, what he intended to be a curse turns into a blessing. Until the last time that he attempts to curse, when he goes up that time, he looks out and he sees the tents and he is unable to curse. So let's look at that. So text number 1. Are we starting here? Yeah, thank you.
Now Balaam, seeing that it pleased Adonai to bless Israel, did not, as on previous occasions, go in search of omens, but turned his face toward the wilderness. As Balaam looked up and saw Israel encamped tribe by tribe, the Spirit of God came upon him. Taking up his theme, he said, Word of Balaam, son of Beor, word of the man whose eye is true, word of one who hears God's speech, who beholds visions from the Almighty, prostrate but with eyes unveiled. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel.
Beautiful. And that's the Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov. Thank you, Joe. One of us was going to sing. Yes.
Well, one of my questions is, where does it say how they build? Sorry. Where does it say?
Did I turn it off?
Hello?
There we go.
Where does it say, I know somewhere, about building your tents so that they shouldn't be facing each other?
I'm
that
so
could
glad you
not
asked.
look into the other person's tent.
I'm so glad you asked that because those are the next few texts we're going to read.
Okay, good.
Perfect. Planted. All right. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, Balaam was moved to say Ma tovu. Right. Okay. So when we say Ma tovu now, this is a tradition for us to say Ma tovu as we walk into a synagogue. It's a traditional prayer. The first recorded prayer book by Rav Sadia Gaon in the 9th century has Ma tovu. Okay, so it goes back at least to then, but maybe even further. But it's unlikely that Balaam was referring to sanctuaries, right? That's not what he's looking at. He's looking at the tents. Mind you also, sanctuaries like this are a later phenomenon. So this verse is teaching us something about the value of how we build our structures to embody our values. That's going to be like one of the big takeaways, okay? So we're going to look at this at, I already gave you two. Okay, so we're going to go to text number 3, which is on page number 2 for you. We're going to look at the Talmud, Talmud Bavli Bava Batra, page 60. All right, yes, thank you.
From where do we know this, that one should not construct a window looking into that of his neighbor? Rabbi Yochanan said, as the verse says, Balaam lifted his eyes and saw Israel residing according to their tribes. What did he see? He saw that the openings of their tents were not aligned with one another. He said, these are worthy of the presence of the divine.
Beautiful. Okay, so this was your point, right? What did he see? He saw that our tents were arranged in such a way to maximize privacy. Right, so you can imagine like everybody's door opening to the back of somebody else's tent, right? So that, I feel like this happens in my house all the time. Like the way that the master bathroom is across the opening to like get dressed. So it's like you shower and then there's this like, the door has to be closed or whatever, you're flashing everybody. That kind of a thing. Like, how do we set up our rooms in such a way where we're going to maximize privacy? And one of the things that Balaam is noticing is not necessarily how good we are, right? How good we are at giving people privacy, how good we are at like censoring ourselves. But what he notices is that we've set up our temporary society in such a way that we will live in a way that gives people privacy and modesty, right? I mean, we definitely learn in the next chapter that we're not so modest. Okay, that's when our guys start sleeping with the Midianites. Okay, so he's noticing how the fronts of our tents face the backs of others. I also wanted to give you the Ramban, who comments also on this. He gives us a little bit of more insight into what he thinks our natural character is. So let's look at that verse 2, number 4.
Rambam to Baba Batra. Also, even if the damaged did relinquish his rights to object to the placement of his neighbor's window, this principle still applies, since it is definitely forbidden to the damager to damage him by seeing and to knowingly look at him. And no person can be sufficiently careful about this to stand all day with closed eyes. So we are compelled to say to him, close your window, and you will not sin constantly, by which he means seal up your window, not close the window pane, as in the times of the Mishnah, windows were just openings in the wall itself.
Right. So when you're saying I just didn't want you to have in the picture of your head, when we close a window, we can still see through it, right? But this is really it's kind of like a mini door. Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Pointed out that first story with the little movie, the short movie. How about start off with someone looking through the window at another apartment? One of the great movies happens to be a Rear Window.
That's what Bobby, yeah.
Did you say that?
I did.
But no, you can say it.
No, where
He wasn't on the
everything
mic.
is violated, according according to this, not only did he look, he took pictures. And the whole movie is based on this revelation of a crime that had been done.
What could he do? He's sitting there with a broken leg looking out the window.
So, yeah, so now you can see why I was thinking of that podcast when I'm studying this verse, right? Here, the Ramban says, like, even if your neighbor is fine with it, it's cool, we're exhibitionists, you can watch us all you want, or it's okay, we're friends, let's have windows facing each other so we can chat through it, right? Much more kosher sounding. He's saying you can't do that because it is too much to ask of yourself. Temptation is too high. I love this line. No person can be sufficiently careful about this to stand all day with closed eyes. Right? If something is right there, it might be too much to ask, like, don't do. All right, any thoughts, reactions? Boop, 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 boop. Okay. All right, so here, the Ramban is highlighting the importance of constructing your house in a certain way, and he's not necessarily commenting on the behavior, right? You want to say, like, ew, peeping Tom, right? I don't know, what do they call a female peeping Tom? Like, I don't know. All right, like, just mind your own business. And to a certain extent, I support that, right? Mind your own business, don't look, blah, blah, blah. But it's also a lot to ask. All right. So he's saying, like, no matter how resolute you are, no matter how determined you are not to look on your neighbor's property, you're not going to succeed if every time you walk by your window, you have to close your eyes, right? Because we are all fallible, and we will fail unless we plan ahead and have framework set up in place in order for us to succeed. Okay. All right, so we've been talking about windows. Yes. Oh, Mike.
I just wanted to ask why not watching somebody else is supposed to be forbidden. I mean, I don't know.
Why watching somebody else is forbidden?
Yeah.
I guess like the thing is that it's not just that, like, I'm looking at you and here we are in this public space, right? But it's that you're looking into somebody's private sphere. The home is your private sphere. Right? Some of us, it's like it's a sanctuary, right? But, you know, the couple that I talked about, they walked around naked all the time. They weren't nudists. They're not walking around in the streets naked, right? But we don't know, right? Yeah.
So in your private sphere, you shouldn't have to close your eyes every time you walk by a window. That's why it's just easier, don't put the window there.
Right.
I guess that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Because it's your private sphere and that encroaches on what you do in your private sphere. You should be able to walk by your window and not have to, I have to close my eyes. That would be annoying. I mean.
Right.
So I guess what I'm saying is, if you just put the window there because it's my house and I want the window where I want it and I'm going to live the way I want in my sphere, is that wrong of you to do that?
Interesting. Well, so it's interesting because the rabbis are really talking about, they are talking about how a community sets up its homes. But it's like a good question in terms of the individual, especially, right? Like you walk through Pinecrest or South Miami. I moved from South Miami to Pinecrest. Pinecrest is not as walkable as South Miami, at least where I live. But there's so many beautiful new homes that are being built that like the entire house is glass. And I remember the first time I saw one of these going up, and I said to my husband, like, what are these people doing? Like, they're not gonna be able to like run downstairs to like grab the pants from the dryer. You know what I mean? Like just normal things. But it's their choice, right? They can close their blind. So it's a very good question. I think it's a good question. But the point I think our rabbis have, it's a very different world, right? Their windows aren't even glass at this point. They're imagining just like the openings and closings. It's interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna think about it.
Rabbi, I'm thinking about this as an issue of technology. The introduction of windows and what it did in terms of separating public from private spaces. For, anthropologically, there was human species evolved without windows. Tents didn't have windows, mud huts didn't have windows. All of a sudden, there was the possibility of building structures with windows. And how did that impact the difference between public space and private space? And maybe that's what they're wrestling with.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. Yes. All right. And, I'm going to give you this one because then I'm going to make you read it.
Thank you. I think it's more a lesson in being considerate of others. We don't live in a bubble. We're usually bound to have neighbors, and it's not only considering your privacy, it's also considering your neighbor's privacy. It's consideration of others. All the rights that we have, I like to say that my freedom ends where yours begins.
Right.
And you have to be considerate of others.
So this is, all right, you ready? I'm going to give you an embarrassing story. Okay, so as you know, I grew up in Indiana, in like a little neighborhood. So we didn't have any full-length mirrors, but I used to, in my room at night, like the window would turn into a mirror, right? You turn on the light. So I would like dance in front of the window, right? Fast forward a couple of years, we actually like meet some kids who live in one of the houses that were the back of their house abuts ours. And like he's like making jokes about watching us dance in the window. Right? Like I wasn't thinking that this was for anyone else, but like how you can see that dancing with yourself.
Does this follow the theme of modesty throughout the Middle East? Because we all grew up with the concept that the more orthodox you were, the more observant you were, the more you were required to cover, women were required to cover their faces, their arms, and walking through Mayor Shireen with exposed arms was not a good thing. Even walking into a church was not a good thing. So I was wondering if they all are related. Looking into the window with women who were, maybe they didn't think they were immodest, but in the long run they were.
So great question. That's why I was like a little uncomfortable with what the Ramban is saying. Like even if the person is okay, you still shouldn't, right? Because you think about, yes, the way women dress. So I was just in Israel. When we went to the Temple Mount, women had to cover our wrists, right, and our ankles, right, and a skirt below your knees. The men also, by the way, were allowed to wear shorts, but they had to go below the knees. A couple of them, they were a little too short, so they made them put these like green skirts on. Okay? But then from the Temple Mount, we went down to the wall, and now all of a sudden, you're still dressed modestly, but you can wear, as long as your shoulders cover, you can wear a t-shirt. Men can wear any size shorts, right? Maybe not a Speedo, but nobody's stopping them. And women can now show their calves, right? So like the definition of modesty right, is very different culturally and from place to place.
And within movements to movements.
Yeah. But it becomes hard, right? When you go to Miami Beach and like men and women alike are wearing thongs on the beach, and if, like, you can imagine somebody saying, like, don't look at my butt, and you're like, but your butt is there, right? Like, it's hard. It's hard, like, you know, in terms of, I very much believe in self-expression through how you dress and want to support that. And at the same time, it does draw attention, and it's not necessarily fair to ask people not to look, right? It's not fair to ask people to walk around with their eyes closed. Yes. To the back. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I think that the right of privacy, even as a legal concept, the recognition that as a human being, there is a sphere within yourself that is private and that no one else, no matter the community that you are in, can really peek into and opine and like take part of that, is a legal recognition, even within the law. It's a right of the individual, and it was recognized over the years. It wasn't immediate. I think that also creates the rules in connection with how to behave in a society without losing that individuality that you have. Mm-hmm. But what you were saying about the podcast, there is also an expectation of privacy. And that expectation of privacy ends when you are doing what they were doing. So there is a line that you draw, even to this day. You know, I mean, if you are in your house and you are in front of 700 units across yourself within a certain close distance that you don't need to have a telescope to check, and you are opening your shades, there is no expectation of privacy in that sense, because you can appreciate that someone can look at you. So irrespective of whether you are within your house, even those Pinecrest houses that have these humongous glasses, you can appreciate that your actions can be seen. And I think that is also where you draw the line, you know, to what extent you are provoking this in a way that you know that you are going to cause that. And that in itself should not necessarily be protected. Because if you are like doing what you are doing in front of my house with your open window, your neighbor in the podcast was like enjoying herself or maybe like remembering of a past that was better than the today. But many other people may feel offended, you know, and they may feel, why do I need to really see this? This is actually intruding my privacy because
Right.
It's coming into my house.
Actually, like, what's interesting is she did feel that way at first. You know, like, here she is feeling self-conscious about her body, and there's this, like, gorgeous, like, young 20-year-old woman, right, with a pre-baby body, like, having wonderful sex, and here she is, like, miserable with a toddler. But interesting. Okay. Yes, and then yes, and then we keep going, because there's two more things I want to
guess,
get to.
you know, the complexity that we're discussing is very interesting, but I think it comes down to a very simple idea, which is that personal space is holy.
Yeah.
Whether it's your personal space or another's personal space. And in that space, we have an opportunity to see within ourselves, to have thoughts and perform actions that are personal and related to God. And so when you are looking into that space, whether that person realizes it or cares or not, doesn't really matter. You're invading their space, and you're really invading your own. You're really opening your own space up. So I find it all interesting, and I think it is related to modesty and all of these other things, but I think it boils down to the fact that personal space is holy and offers us a lot of opportunities that perhaps we don't take full advantage of.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Where does privacy and modesty meet responsibility? Because responsibility is a word that's just like in my head listening to all of this, because your modesty is really your responsibility. Because if you're standing in front of your window at night with the lights on and no cover on the window, naked, it's like someone said, there is no expectation of privacy in that situation. And you're giving away your privacy and modesty because you're not being responsible enough to cover the window or don't stand there, or, you know? So I think responsibility plays a lot into it, instead of expecting everyone else is going to honor my privacy and I don't have to do anything.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I think it's interesting to note in the United States right now, in the political climate we have, that there are a lot of laws, a lot of court cases that involve an understanding that there is a right to privacy. And then there's a question about the fact that privacy is not written into our Constitution. Can we assume that it is something that was understood, perhaps from the Bible, because we did have
Right.
church, Christian leaders who wrote the Constitution. But the whole issue of privacy is very interesting, because a lot of the things that we're looking at today, the laws that are being changed or going backwards, in my view, are based on an understanding that there is a personal right to privacy. And it's questionable even now. I mean, it's something that hasn't been discussed outright as privacy, but it's there. It underlies it all.
I have a question. Can people who live in a nudist colony still be holy if they're within their nudist colony thing? Everybody is of the same mindset, and that they don't go outside, and they don't display themselves outside the nudist colony. Can they be holy?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That lady had mentioned an amazing statement: "My freedom ends when yours begins." Think of the recent Supreme Court decision where LGBTQ wanted a public business to do something, a design, a cake, whatever it was, an announcement of their wedding, and that owner refused to do it on the basis of her freedom.
Right.
Nobody asked her to do it, she just.
That was.
No, but the point I'm saying is a perfect example of these people's freedom ends. My freedom ends when yours begin. And the freedom of privacy or whatnot, or personal, or whatever they wanted, their freedom of being who they are ends when someone else rebels against it due to religious reasons.
Okay, so there are like public goods, right? Somebody like if a grocery store said, "I'm not going to serve you because you're black," we would all be offended, right? If they said it's a Christian cake maker, right? What if they don't want to do my cake because I'm Jewish, right? I don't want to go down this road. I don't want to go down this road. We'll go back to this.
Yeah.
That being said,
Let's go back to the talking donkey.
we'll talk to, yes. Yeah, the talking donkey's in the road. Is it the road like Sing the Angel? That being said, when we provide a service, then we don't necessarily, because we live in this beautiful, multi-faith, multi-gender, multi-ethnicity, diverse society, I would hope that we can't pick one group of people and say, "I'm not going to serve you."
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
We're talking about a traditional window in our Torah portion, but the window now has been technologically expanded to in your pocket and your security cameras at home. The Israeli software can now turn on your surveillance cameras. They can turn on and off your phone in terms of the camera and microphone. So what is the presumption of privacy in the modern world? What are the new windows into our privacy? It's a very significant problem.
It is. So right now, right, people, if anybody wanted to, if a hacker wanted to, they could hack into your computer. And what can they do besides look at everything on there? They can look through your camera, right? They can see you, they can see what you're doing, right? I leave mine open all the time, they could be watching, right? I'm not that special. Nobody's gonna do that. But, right, like so this question, that, okay, what Bilam sees, what the Talmud talks about, what Ramban applauds, is not that we are so good that we aren't gonna hack, right? He's like, no, we're gonna hack, right? We're gonna look. Are you kidding? There's hot 20-year-olds having sex around the way. I'm gonna watch, right? What they're saying is we are fallible, but what is applaudable is setting up our society in a way to prevent that, right? So what are the preventions that we have from people hacking in? I love that. All right, I really want to keep going because there's...
Well, today, with social media, the younger generation is very willing to give up their privacy. They put everything on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. They're using, it's a green light for them, and then they enjoy sharing, and in some cases, young women are putting very seductive photographs on these social media sites, and they're not upset about it. They want other people to see them in various ways. I think it's a problem, but the younger generation loves enjoying and vicariously living through all the TikTok moves that girls do. They go to parks and do little dances and sometimes seductive. So it's a different generation.
All right, thank you. All right, Bobby, is it okay if I keep us moving? Is it important? It's important.
Is it what?
I just want to keep going.
Okay. I'll make it fast. It seems as though you have some degree of control over privacy, your privacy. If a young girl wants to prance around in front of an open window, that she's not entitled to a great deal of privacy, where people in the public can see through that window. If she wants privacy, she should close her blinds. She can't come out and say, you're invading my privacy when you've done nothing to protect it. They have a responsibility too.
Choice. All right, so I want to move us forward a little bit because there's two other things that I'm hoping we will get to. I never know where the conversation's gonna go. I only know where my head goes when I'm preparing. So where my head went when I was preparing this, talking about how important it is for us to set up society in a way where we have privacy, is how this kind of contradiction between privacy and what we learn and welcoming, right? When you have your window, most of us went to college, right? In college, you would leave your dorm room, the door open, right? That meant you could stop by, come say hi, blah, blah, blah. Even in my office, in your office, right? When your door is open, it sends a sign like, come in, welcome. I might be busy, but I'm not that busy, right? When it's closed, then you're asking for privacy, right? So we're talking about the importance of these closures and the opening, and so that's where my head went, is but what about the welcoming? Because we know how important Hachnasat Orchim is, right? Welcoming guests in Jewish tradition. And when we talk about privacy, once we invite people in, right? We are a people who invite people in, like supposedly, right? That's what Abraham was known for. Then they can see a lot of things, right? They see the books you read, maybe not anymore because of Kindles and things like that, but they might see pictures from where you've traveled, who's in your family. If you come to my house, you'll see whatever mess I haven't cleaned up. You are invited into somebody's space, and you learn about them in that space. So I was thinking about that. And so we have the text from Pirkei Avot. Yossi ben Yochanan of Jerusalem used to say, "Let your house be wide open, and let the poor be members of your household." Right? So wide open house. Come and stop by. So it's this, what I liked about this text is not just that it gives us the message of the importance of Hachnasat Orchim, but this text, just like what Bilam noticed, that it's not that we're actually modest, we just set up our homes in a way to protect privacy, is that he's not necessarily saying that we're welcoming people. He's asking us to make our houses welcoming. Right? How do you set up your house in a way where it's open and welcoming? I struggle with this, by the way, all the time with Beth Am. I love our synagogue. We are open and embracing and everything, but if you don't have a sticker on your car, that's not your experience, right? It's like a fortress blocked by multiple fences with security cameras, and you come to a gate and you're getting searched and swiped and
Never set up encyclopedias.
Right. It's not, so we have to live with contradictions though, right? So how do we, here, Yosef ben Yochanan, sorry for the F, is telling us to set up our homes in a way to be conducive to inviting people over, to increase the opportunities to host and be with others. It also, so what are some of the benefits of just having an open house? Oh, do we have real estate agents here? In real estate, right, when you're trying to sell a home, right, you call the number, you make an appointment, blah, blah, blah. But when you have the open house, it gets rid of all of those barriers. People can just walk in and see,
Yeah, everybody shows up. Open house doesn't say anything to anybody other than the fact that it's open, so whatever color, whatever race, whatever religion you want to drive by, you go in. So that's a great example.
Yeah, yes.
But in an open house lately, what they tell you to do is to take all personal stuff out. So you're opening your house, but your personal stuff, your pictures and stuff like that, they tell you to take it down so that people don't see that stuff because you still have your privacy.
That's interesting. Okay, so that's, okay, so in this commentary to Pirkei Avot, we have the Avot de Rabbi Natan, chapter 7. He makes it even more explicit that the advice that Yosef ben Yochanan is giving is about creating a structure that facilitates entry to guests rather than modifying your own behavior. So let's look at this really quick. Annabelle, what do you have? 6. Yep.
Your house should be open wide. How? This teaches that a person's house should be wide open to the south, the east, the west, and the north, like Job did. he made 4 openings to his house. And why did Job make 4 openings to his house? So that the poor would not be inconvenienced in having to go around the house. One who came from the north could enter as he was already walking. One who came from the south could enter as he was already walking, and similarly for any direction. And when the great suffering came upon him, he said before the Holy Blessed One, Master of the universe, didn't I feed the hungry and give drink to the thirst? As it says, did I eat my bread alone without an orphan eating with me? Nevertheless, this is what the Holy Blessed One said to Job. Job, you still haven't reached half the amount of Abraham. You sit and wait inside your house, and the guests come to you. But Abraham does not do so. Rather, he goes out and circles around the world, and when he finds guests, brings them into his house.
All right, so we get this like cool kind of juxtaposition of Job, right, the righteous sufferer, and Abraham. But Job, it sounds, what do you think like the differences are between Job and Abraham? Yeah, Joe.
Job's inside his house and waiting for everybody to come to him, and Abraham is outside the tent welcoming everybody.
All right, so Job is inside the house saying, come on over, but like, to who, right? Right? So his house is open, he is welcoming, it's wonderful, but he's just waiting for people to come to him. He's not going out and trying to recruit, right? Whereas we see Abraham, 3rd day after getting a circumcision in his 90s, running out of the house to like welcome guests, okay? A very, very, like, you know, not just inconvenient, but painful on his part, but it's such a value for him. He wants people to come in, right? And he even, I gave you the text, but I didn't give you the text until the next page, number 10. Okay, God appeared to him, meaning Abraham, by the terebinths of Mamre. He was sitting at the entrance of the tent as the gray dew hot. Okay, this is for another study, but there is this really awesome interpretation of this where it's, look, it says God appears to Abraham. So Abraham was there with God. And then what does Abraham do? He looks up and he sees 3 people and he runs away from God to go and get them. All right, so how important is Hachnasat Orchim? That you even leave God's presence to welcome other people. Pretty wild, right? All right, so, all right, so we'll come back to that text. But so we have this juxtaposition, and you got to think about, like, so what is it about their characters that might be a little bit different? Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, just, I mean, a different interpretation of it is he sees God and hears God, and God tells him to welcome the people that are coming in. He doesn't run away from God. He listens to him. And God says, the way you're going to help me is not coming to me as God, but coming to my people.
That's beautiful. Okay, so good, beautiful. I love your interpretation. We'll put it in our new Torah commentary. I love that, right? That like God is not just, Abraham's not leaving God, but Abraham understands that how you serve God is to go and be with people and not dwell in that like private space. Actually, when you were talking earlier about like what is privacy and what's our private spaces, I was thinking about prayer, right? And like I don't know if this has happened to you guys. It might only happen to rabbis. I think it happens to all of us, but like that I'll be in it, right? I'll be praying, I'll be feeling it, and someone will like make a comment or come up and they've like violated my privacy. They don't know. I'm in a public space, but there's all of these questions that the rabbis grapple with in terms of the contrasting values of when you're praying and somebody walks in, there's still the value of welcoming that person and saying hello to that person. And what if that person's your teacher? What do you know, all of these things. And when do we stop our prayer, modify our prayer, pause our prayer, etc.? Okay, yes, and then.
Kind of like the difference between passive and active charity, and making it
Yes.
as easy as possible for those who need help to get help.
Beautiful. Okay, so difference between passive and active, right? Job is passive. Still a great guy, right? But not necessarily active. We, right, when we think about giving charity, because you said like charity, right? There's ways we can passively do it and actively do it, right? But there's also, so what I want to notice is that Job, we don't know if Job is a naturally welcoming person. We know that Abraham is, right? This is definitely like a value for him. This is something he loves to do. We see this is like one of his core character traits. We don't know if Job is that person, but Job knows that it's a value, right? And so what does he do? He sets up his tent, right? Like in a way, I don't know why I wanted to draw that. In a way where no matter where you're coming from, you see it's open, you see there are people there, you can come on in. But he doesn't have to, maybe he's an introvert. Maybe he's an introvert. Like, he doesn't have to like go and invite you, right? A lot of us like sometimes get in that like, oh, I know that this person is going through a hard time, right? But I don't want to violate their privacy. And so we don't reach out. Sucks, right? Because you know what, like we should. That's a brave space that we need to go into to reach out. But maybe we can set up things in a way where and I often will do this. I don't know if you want to talk. I don't know if you feel comfortable yet. But I want you to know you have an open invitation, right? How do we make a tent, an open space where people feel they know they're invited? You're always invited. You don't need the invitation because it's a standing invitation, right? Yes.
I don't remember which rabbi said it, but there's a
Rabbi
saying.
Barris? No.
But he said when you're trying to do something good for someone, it's not enough to reach down and pull people out of their poverty. You have to go down with them. So you have to move yourself, make an active attempt. So Kenny, that active passive thing. You have to make an active attempt to go down and experience what they're experiencing before you realize the full extent of their problem.
I think, Joe, was it at the presentation that you just had in this space where she talked about that? Yeah, there was a video where they talked about like the difference between sympathy and empathy, right? And sympathy is like you're looking down into the pit like, sorry, I'm like, that sucks. And empathy is like actually climbing down into the pit. Beautiful.
Couldn't it be that God believed that actions spoke louder than words, and Job sat and prayed all day, and Abraham actually did actions?
I do think.
Just building on your comment about private prayer and getting interrupted by the world or somebody might not even know you're praying, but how more it intensifies one's prayer if you're kind and loving and welcoming to the interrupter than if you find it annoying, you even get angry. Like God would look down and say, really, you were just praying?
Yes, okay, beautiful, beautiful, all right.
This may advance into something else you have on the sheet, but it should be noted that when Abraham welcomed people in, he went and he said to his wife, quick, go prepare some food for us.
All right, yes, okay, so that is another point I wanted to make. So, okay, so if we rewind, and we go back to 7, where Yosef ben Yochanan, oh wait, no, sorry, 7 is where we're going to. First, we want to go back to this beautiful verse from Pirkei Avot in 5, where Yosef ben Yochanan of Jerusalem says, "Let your house be wide open. Let the poor come and be members of your household." Guess what? Also in that Mishnah, he says, "And do not speak overly much with women." Number 7. All right. So I gave you a quote from Rabbi Dina Weiss from Hadar in 8. She says, according to the Breslover Nahalat Avot commentary, which, by the way, I tried to look up, and it was all in Hebrew, and I was like, I don't know how much time I have for this, so I used her translation. The connection between the first half of the Mishnah, which discusses welcoming guests, and the last half, which warns against speaking too much to women, is exactly your point. Is in that in his experience, it was the women who would be resistant when their husbands would try to institute an open tent policy in the house. Now, why might women not want to have a bunch of strangers in their house?
Because they're the ones home cooking for
Because they're the ones home cooking, right? Exactly. That is actually why I gave you text 10, where we see Abraham welcoming the guest. Is the first, he's like, come in, wonderful, wonderful. Sarah, get cooking, right?
Sarah, take care of it.
This is my husband and me, by the way. I'm like, everyone should come over, and he knows I don't cook, right? So it's not necessarily fair. Like, I don't think that even this, Yosef ben Yochanan, when he's saying don't talk too much with women, he might be saying, according to this understanding, that like they're going to convince you not to do it because it's so much work for them, right? An alternative could be help cook, order out, yeah.
Is it the person who's inviting them, the person not to talk to the women, or the people who are coming in not to talk to the women? It's a completely different dynamic.
Okay, no, so Pirkei Avot is basically like these gleaned words of wisdom from the rabbis. And these are his words of wisdom, which is let your house be wide open, poor be members of your household. And you're thinking like, oh, what a loving, embracing, open-minded person. And then he says, and don't talk too much to women. So the Breslover commentary is trying to connect those two things. I don't know. There's other commentaries on that, like women are gossips and like terrible things about women because it was, written by men without the input of women. Yes.
So it's not just one more piece of bread and one more place setting. It's, oh my God, I have to clean up the room. The kids made a mess over there. We got to put the puppy away. Have to put a better tablecloth. I don't want to come in like this. Have to clean up, and then we can put out the bread and the thing.
Yes, beautiful. Okay, so you were looking ahead a little bit. Which one?
Page 4 in the top.
Oh, page 4. Oh, yes. Rebbe Nachman of Braslav. Right. So my bubby used to always say this. So I'd say, I don't know if you know, I lived with my bubby for a year in New York when I was in rabbinical school, and I'd say, can my friends come over for dinner? And she would always say, I'll put another cup of water in the soup. She was never making soup, but that was like, her expression. So that's like a little bit of this, right? I think exactly what you're talking about, though, is sometimes what gets in the way of us being welcoming, right? Like, we want people to come over, but our house is a mess. The laundry's all over the couch. You're packing, like right now we're packing for camp, whatever it is, right? So the only people you let in your house that way is family and best friends, right? Maybe. But like maybe we could have a different sort of a society, like, where we don't have to have everything be perfect. I remember one of our past presidents,
Not me.
Not you, not you. But she told me that she always loved to have people over for Shabbat, but people got uncomfortable that she didn't have somebody to clean the dishes. But she, like, that was part of her, Shabbat is like not having people working for her on Shabbat. And, but it would make people uncomfortable, right? Like, so how do we set up? I want to go back to that, because that's really the question of this whole thing, is like, how do we set up our lives in such a way? How do we set up our community in such a way, right? How do I set up my day in such a way that I am going to live my values, all right? So it's 10. All right. So I am going to skip a very cool midrash, which is number 12, where Mar Ukva and his wife jump into a fiery furnace, because that, I don't know, like, happens. And I'm going to take us actually to my notes on atomic habits. Some of you might have read this book. I read the cheater version of the book. I read a summary of Atomic Habits. It wasn't Cliff Notes, but it was a summary. And what he talks about, here, actually, we can have somebody read this. I'll read it, fine. Okay. He talks about basically how to make habits. Most of our life, this is in Musar as well, we learn this, most of our decisions we don't think about. It's just a habit, it's a reflex. We don't, right? If you had to, do you remember like the first time you tried to drive a car? And it was like everything, right? Like, are my hands in the right place? My food, the wind, the mirrors, and you couldn't, it was like so hard because you were paying attention to every little thing, right? You can't drive a car if you're paying attention to every little thing. Most of life you can't accomplish if you're paying attention to every detail. Most of what we do is habit. Most of what we do is instinct. So this book, of course, is about building good habits so that you don't have to do things. And Maimonides talks, this is my favorite, Maimonides, so you've probably heard me say it like 12 times, and I'm going to say it again, right? That when we're working on our generosity muscle, it's if you only have $100, that's your tithing for the year. Don't give the 100 once, open your hand 100 times, right? Make giving a habit. So this book is all about creating habits as well. Good habits that will reflect what we want our lives to look like, that we're living our values. Okay, so conventional wisdom holds that motivation is the key to habit change, right? We have to be really motivated to X, right? But the truth is, our real motivation is to be lazy and to do what is convenient. Despite what the latest productivity bestseller will tell you, laziness is a smart strategy and not a dumb one. Energy is precious, and the brain is wired to conserve it whenever possible. Habits like scrolling on our phones, checking email, and watching television steal so much of our time because they are performed almost without effort. Right? You get stuck scrolling or watching TV or playing. Right? Anyways, so certainly you are capable of doing very hard things. The problem is that some days you feel like doing the hard work, and some days you feel like giving in. On tough days, it's crucial to have as many things working in your favor as possible so you can overcome the challenges life naturally throws your way. Habits are easier to build when they fit into your flow of life. The central idea is to create an environment where doing the right thing is as easy as possible, right? So we're creating an environment. We're building our tents with the windows facing, or the doors facing the back of other tents, right? We're making sure our windows don't align if privacy is our value, right? So now we can take this and talk about what are our other values? Like who do I want to be? What do I want to do? Like, how am I going to exercise, right? That's the giving muscle, right? If I want to be more generous, how am I going to build that in? Somebody gave me a great, I gave a sermon like one of my first couple of years here about giving tzedakah, and somebody told me that they went to the bank and got $51 bills and put it in their armrest in their car. And I was like, that's brilliant, right? They were setting up a structure so that they will always have money to give to somebody who's spare changing, right? How do we set those things up? How do we make them automatic, right? How do we build an open tent because I don't have the time to go and recruit people in? Did you want to? I didn't know if you, okay. So he gives a few ideas. So if you want to remember to take your medicine each night, put your pill bottle directly next to the faucet on the bathroom counter. If you're like me, you can't remember if you've taken them or not. So I have this new method where I take out my pill, like all of my 3 pill bottles. And then after I take each pill, I put it in the drawer so that I know it was taken. If you want to practice guitar more frequently, place your guitar stand in the middle of the living room, right? It's in a case over in the corner. You're not going to see it. It's inconvenient. You have to stop and do, right? So what are those things, right? So if we want to work out more, we might sleep in our gym clothes. So when we wake up in the morning, we're already to go to the gym, right? Or we can set a structure up, right? Like we'll have a friend, and now I'm responsible to that friend, right? That's why like habits are easier when they're with other people. So what Bilam noticed in us, in our ancestors, was not that we were exceptional individuals, even though obviously we are, and I've gotten all of your forwards about how amazing Jews are story. What he noticed was that we set up society in a way to help us be the best versions of ourselves. And that's really a value that we need to keep visiting again and again. So yes, now we live in a world where it's nice to have big open windows, and we can debate about privacy and online, but we still live in a world where it is too hard to rely on ourselves to always do the right thing. It's too much to ask. So how do we set up structures in a way that are going to help us to be the best versions of ourselves? How do we set up a society in a way where we're going to be compassionate to people who are different than us? Because it might be too much to ask every once in a while for us to see the other as the image of God, right? How can we keep doing that? So I want to thank you for studying with me and for committing to helping us as Beth Am and hopefully like the Miami community, and that it's the 4th coming soon, right? Like the United States. Thank you for helping us to be better versions of ourselves and for trying to help us structure in a more welcoming way. Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Thanks.
Do you take them to camp?
Ha ha ha.